So you've probably heard about this G7 thing. What is it exactly? Well, in simple terms, a fancy club for rich countries. It's an exclusive gathering, a bit like a high-stakes poker game, but instead of chips, they're playing with the fate of the global economy. The G7, or Group of Seven, is the VIP section of the world economy, the place where the big players come together to discuss, debate, and sometimes disagree on the direction of things. Think of it as the economic equivalent of the Avengers, but instead of saving the world from supervillains, they're trying to save it from recessions and climate change. So who gets a seat at this exclusive table? First up, we have Canada, known for its vast landscapes and polite diplomacy. Then there's France and Germany, the powerhouses of Europe, each bringing their unique perspectives and economic strengths to the discussion. Next we have Italy, Japan, and the UK, each with their own rich history and significant role in the global marketplace. And last but not least, the US. Now you might remember a time when Russia was part of this club. It was called the G8 back then. But after Crimea, they were kicked out, back to 7. It was a major geopolitical shift, a clear message that certain actions have consequences on the world stage. So what do these leaders actually do when they get together? Well, these leaders meet yearly to tackle global economics, climate change, and security, basically the world's biggest problems. They discuss everything from trade agreements to environmental regulations, trying to find common ground and solutions that benefit everyone. The goal? Align policies and show unity, projecting stability to the world. It's about sending a message that these major economies are working together to address the challenges facing the planet. Think of it as a carefully choreographed dance where each leader tries to move in sync with the others, even if they have different steps in mind. The hope is that this coordinated effort will lead to stable markets, a more peaceful world, and a brighter future for all. The host country picks a scenic, private spot, think corporate retreat, but with nuclear codes. These summits are often held in luxurious locations, far away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, allowing leaders to focus on the important issues at hand. Security is always tight, with top-level protection ensuring the safety of all attendees. At the end, they release a communiqué, a group statement of what they agree on. It's a carefully worded document, often the result of intense negotiations and compromises designed to present a united front to the world. For decades it was a smooth, predictable process. The G7 was seen as a reliable force for stability and cooperation in the world. But in 2018 everything changed. The old rules no longer seemed to apply. The summit was in Charlevoix, Quebec, hosted by Justin Trudeau. The stage was set for what everyone thought would be another routine gathering of world leaders. But President Trump arrived with a different agenda. No interest in unity, just tariffs and Twitter. He disrupted the carefully crafted atmosphere of cooperation with his unconventional approach to diplomacy. He saw the G7 as a rigged game, ready to flip the table. Instead of harmony, he brought confrontation, turning the summit into a global spectacle. It was a stark departure from the traditional norms of international relations. The world watched as long-standing alliances were tested, and the future of global cooperation hung in the balance. The G7, once a symbol of unity, became the world's most watched reality show. Every tweet, every handshake, every facial expression was scrutinized and analyzed by the global media. The stage was set for a showdown. The old script was out the window, and the world was watching, wondering what the future held for this once stable alliance. So, what was the central economic challenge that consumed the Trump administration? What was the one thing that dominated headlines and shaped policy decisions? Tariffs. These weren't just minor adjustments to trade policy, they were a core tenet of Trump's economic vision. A tariff is essentially a tax on imports. The idea is to make goods coming from other countries more expensive, thereby making domestically produced goods more attractive and protecting local jobs. It's a classic protectionist measure. Trump argued America was being taken advantage of by allies. He believed that other nations were unfairly benefiting at the expense of American businesses and workers. He specifically called out countries like Canada and the EU, accusing them of engaging in trade practices that were detrimental to the United States. He claimed the US was the world's piggy bank, constantly being robbed by unfair trade deals that favored other nations. He painted a picture of America as a victim of global trade. In March 2018 he took decisive action, imposing a hefty 25% tariff on steel imports. This was a significant move with potentially far-reaching consequences. And he didn't stop there. He also slapped a 10% tariff on aluminum imports, even targeting some of America's closest allies in the process. To justify these tariffs, Trump invoked a rarely used national security loophole, arguing that these imports threatened America's ability to defend itself. Allies like Canada and Europe were stunned by this unexpected move. They felt blindsided by what they perceived as an aggressive act. They were suddenly being treated not as partners, but as potential threats to American security and economic well-being. Trump's logic was straightforward. These tariffs would force other countries to negotiate fairer trade deals with the U.S., ultimately bringing jobs back to American soil. But many of America's closest friends and allies saw this not as a genuine attempt at negotiation, but as a betrayal of long-standing partnerships. The move set the stage for a full-blown trade war, with potentially devastating consequences for the global economy. Allies, feeling unfairly targeted, quickly prepared to hit back with their own retaliatory tariffs, escalating the conflict. The upcoming G7 summit was about to become a highly charged and potentially chaotic affair, with tensions running high among world leaders. The world braced for the impact of this escalating trade war, unsure of what the future held for the global economy. America's allies were furious. The sudden imposition of tariffs, justified under national security grounds, was seen as a blatant disregard for established trade agreements and diplomatic norms. Decades of carefully cultivated relationships were suddenly strained, leaving many world leaders feeling blindsided and betrayed. The move sparked a wave of anger and disbelief across the globe. Canada, usually polite and known for its diplomatic approach, was outraged. The close neighbor and long-standing ally felt particularly aggrieved by what they perceived as an unwarranted attack on their economy. Trudeau called the tariffs an insult to decades of partnership, emphasizing the deep economic and strategic ties between the two nations. He expressed his disappointment and vowed to defend Canada's interests. He reminded everyone, Canadian steel and soldiers had always stood with the U.S., highlighting the country's unwavering support in times of both economic and military need. He underscored the shared sacrifices and the importance of mutual respect in the relationship. Europe was equally angry. The tariffs were viewed as a direct challenge to the principles of free trade and international cooperation that had underpinned the global economy for decades. Macron called the tariffs illegal, denouncing them as a violation of international trade law and a threat to the multilateral system. He asserted that France would not stand idly by while its industries were unfairly targeted. Merkel promised countermeasures, signaling a firm resolve to retaliate against the U.S. tariffs and protect German businesses. She emphasized the importance of a united European front in the face of what she saw as an act of economic aggression. The EU and Canada drew up their own tariffs, carefully selecting products that would inflict maximum economic pain on the United States. Targeting iconic American goods like Harley-Davidson motorcycles and bourbon, goods closely associated with American identity and key voting demographics. It was a calculated response, hit Trump's political base, aiming to create domestic pressure for a change in policy. This wasn't negotiation, it was economic warfare. The gloves were off, and the world's major economies were locked in a bitter struggle over trade and power. The pushback was about more than money. It was about trust and the rules everyone had played by, the very foundation of the post-war international order. Trump's move bypassed the World Trade Organization, breaking decades-old norms and undermining the authority of the international body designed to resolve trade disputes. Allies felt betrayed, the alliance shaken. The very fabric of international cooperation seemed to be unraveling. The G7's friendly club vibe was gone. Now it looked more like a bar fight. The atmosphere was tense, and the leaders struggled to find common ground. The trust built over 70 years was crumbling. The foundations of the post-World War II order were being questioned. The stakes had never been higher. The future of international trade and diplomacy hung in the balance. As the summit neared, tensions exploded online. Trump fired off tweets accusing Trudeau and Macron of unfair trade practices. He framed himself as the victim, ready for a fight. Macron and Trudeau hit back, hinting the G7 could go on without the US. The usual diplomatic niceties vanished. Leaders were trading public insults. The media went wild, covering every tweet and jab. The summit felt less like diplomacy, more like a heavyweight boxing match. Normally, disagreements were private. Now the drama was front and center. The world watched, wondering if the leaders could even pretend to get along. The atmosphere was electric, unpredictable. The G7 had never seen anything like it. The stage was set for confrontation. The world held its breath. Trump arrived late, planning to leave early, hardly a peacemaker. He immediately complained about unfair trade, calling the G7 a piggy bank. Private meetings were tense, like a family dinner gone wrong. Reports leaked of fiery exchanges and bizarre moments, like Trump tossing starbursts at Merkel. The other leaders tried to reason with him, armed with facts and charts. They argued tariffs would hurt everyone, but Trump stuck to his America First script. The core clash, multilateral cooperation versus Trump's transactional, nationalist approach. The G7's purpose itself was in dispute. No real progress was possible. Each side talked past the other. The summit became a dialogue of the deaf. The old order was breaking down, the mood was tense, the outcome uncertain. The world watched the alliance unravel. One photo captured the summit's chaos. Merkel leans over a table, staring down a defiant, arms-crossed Trump. Other leaders look on, some frustrated, some resigned. The image became the summit's symbol, confrontation, not unity. To critics, Trump looked isolated and stubborn. To supporters, he was standing his ground. The photo was a Rorschach test for the Trump era. It showed the alliance under strain, America at odds with its friends. The G7's unity was just a memory. Trump left the summit early, skipping key sessions for a meeting with Kim Jong-un. Before leaving, he held a combative press conference, claiming great relationships and threatening more tariffs. On Air Force One, he watched Trudeau's closing remarks, where Trudeau called U.S. tariffs insulting and promised retaliation. Trump erupted on Twitter, calling Trudeau dishonest and weak. He withdrew U.S. support for the joint communiqué, an unprecedented move. The summit's main achievement was instantly destroyed. The other leaders were stunned. The G7 had officially imploded. The world saw the alliance fracture in real time. Trust was shattered. The U.S. had turned on its closest allies. The fallout was immediate and severe. The G7's future was in doubt. The global order was shaken. The drama wasn't over yet. The fallout was swift. Canada and the EU imposed retaliatory tariffs on billions in U.S. goods. Companies like Harley-Davidson moved production overseas to dodge tariffs. The economic pain was real. Consumers and businesses on both sides felt it. Politically, the damage was worse. Trump's attack on Trudeau sent a chilling message. No ally was safe. Trust in U.S. leadership collapsed. The G7 was in tatters, the Western alliance fractured. The world was left to pick up the pieces. Years later, the legacy is clear. Trust between the U.S. and its allies is still shaky. Europe is pursuing more independence, wary of U.S. unpredictability. Trump's tariffs didn't bring back many jobs, costs rose and farmers suffered. The trade war hurt more than it helped. For Trump's base, the summit was proof of his outsider strength. For critics, it was chaos and isolation. The 2018 G7 showed how quickly alliances can unravel. Personal politics can shake the global order. The world is still dealing with the aftershocks. Even the most exclusive clubs can fall apart, fast.